Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Landrigan. Today I'm going to be talking about breast cancer, endocrine disruptors, and early puberty. Breast cancer statistics are startling. We all know someone with breast cancer, a mother, a daughter, a colleague, a friend, a neighbor. And what we know about breast cancer is largely focused on adult risk factors. And those risk factors include these: female gender, increasing age, family history, genetic factors, radiation exposure, adult obesity, menopause after the age of 55, and having your first child after the age of 35. But while the adult risk factors are fairly well characterized, the early life risk factors from pregnancy through adolescence are not well characterized. So what if we could intervene, not here at this age, or even at the mother's age, but for this child? What if there was something that we could do for this child to reduce or prevent her risk of breast cancer? And that's exactly what the NIH NCI-funded breast cancers and the environmental research programs were funded to do, to answer that exact question: what are the early life risk factors for breast cancer? There are 3 sites across the country that have been following over 1,000 girls of racially, ethnically, and socioeconomically diverse girls in New York City, Cincinnati, Ohio, and the Bay Area of California. And we're trying to determine what are those early life risk factors. I'm fortunate to work with this interdisciplinary team here at Mount Sinai, led by Drs. Mary Wolf, Teitelbaum, and Drs. Brenner, and this interdisciplinary team, which includes breast cancer advocates. So what do we know about timing of puberty and breast cancer? Well, it's been well established that early menarche increases the risk for breast cancer by 30%. And this is generally defined as having your first period or your first menstrual cycle less than 12 years of age. The puberty studies are looking at 2 additional time periods. And this includes the transition from a prepubertal child, which you see here, with no noticeable change or size in breast, to the first onset of breast budding with an enlargement of the areolar diameter. And this is what we're defining as the onset of puberty. And we're looking at the second time period defined as pubertal tempo, and that's the transition from age at breast budding to your age at first menstrual cycle. Why are we looking at these time periods when we know that increased exposure to estrogen increases your breast cancer risk? So here's how estrogen levels change throughout life. So here we're going from birth through adulthood, and you see a peak in estrogen levels from the mom after birth, so it peaks and declines. It rises during puberty. It peaks in pregnancy and then declines in menopause. And so the risk factors that we've already talked about, whether it's early menarche, late first pregnancy, or late menopause, these are all things that prolong exposure to estrogen. And that's why we're specifically interested at breast budding and the duration of puberty. And we're looking at the environmental, the lifestyle factors, and the genetic factors that may influence the timing of these milestones. So we've heard today from our earlier speakers about chemicals in everyday goods that disrupt hormones. So I showed you the natural life events that can alter your estrogen exposures, but what about the environmental estrogens that are found in everyday goods? So what we found from this study is if you look at the national cohort of over 1,100 girls, the children are universally exposed. So here are the phthalates that you heard about from Dr. Swan and Mia Dovnik. And here's BPA, or bisphenol A, and here's parabens, which is another chemical found in a number of lotions, for example, that are considered weak estrogens. So exposures are ubiquitous, even in early childhood. And what we've also seen in our study is that the more frequently a girl reports using a product in terms of days per week, the higher their exposures to phthalates, if they reported frequent use of shampoos or products with fragrances in them. And the more frequently they reported lotion use, the higher their exposures to parabens. And the more products they used in general, the higher their exposures. What else have we learned? Well, as a clinician, we've learned that you have to start talking about puberty early, as young as 6, 7, and 8 years old. And this is earlier than when I had actually initiated the study in 2003. I wasn't talking about puberty with my patients at this age. We've learned that 15% of the 7-year-olds have begun puberty, and this differed by race ethnicity. So 23% of African Americans had begun puberty, compared to 14% of Hispanics and 10% of whites. So race ethnicity makes a difference. Body size also makes a difference. So a heavier a child is, the more likely they are to have entered puberty. So having a body mass index greater than the 85th percentile, which is defined as overweight or obese, increases the likelihood that you'll see these changes. But this was less likely for overweight and obese girls that consumed diets that were high in plant-based foods such as these. And while this association that we found in our baseline analyses are not causal, they do confirm what we know to be true, that eating a diet that's rich in a variety of plant-based foods has long-term and wide-ranging health benefits. So what can you do to reduce exposures? You can gather the evidence-based information you need to decide what's best for your family. And in the absence of scientific certainty, you can err on the side of caution and choose what are known to be safer alternatives. So here are some tips. Keep it simple, less is more. So we saw that more increased product use days per week increases exposure, so decrease your product use. Try to shop smart and read labels, and you can look to existing databases like www.cosmeticsdatabase.org and various other websites, which we've actually listed in the handouts in your folder today. So those are guides that can help you to shop smart. Choose fragrance-free products and avoid the use of number 3 and number 7 plastics in the microwave and dishwasher, because we know exposures to high heat can promote leaching to those chemicals. And you can wet dust, wet mop, and ventilate, because these measures help to reduce a number of environmental exposures above and beyond the ones that we're talking about today. But the burden can't remain on the consumer to figure this all out. It's an impossible task. So the question lies in, when is enough science enough to take action? And we know that the road from scientific uncertainty to certainty is a long one and can often take decades, if not longer. And even getting to this point with respect to the body of evidence doesn't guarantee that we're going to have laws that are sufficiently protective of human health. Fortunately, thanks to the advocacy of a number of folks here in the audience today, there has been legislation with respect to a couple of areas. So here's an example of the Suffolk County on Long Island was one of the first to ban BPA in baby bottles, and we subsequently saw a voluntary withdrawal of BPA from the majority of baby bottle manufacturers on the market. Connecticut was one of the first to ban BPA in thermal receipt paper. California has a Safe Cosmetics Act that specifically targets phthalates. And lastly, the one piece of federal legislation we have on phthalates is a Consumer Product Safety Commission's act passed in 2008, and this is unfolding as we speak. But there's more work to be done. So we've heard already from Judith Eng that TSCA reform is urgently needed, and there have been proposed bills to overhaul the federal toxic chemical policies, and they specifically require chemicals be proven safe for children before they're sold. And in my time at Sinai, I've learned that when we all speak with one voice, it can make a huge impact. So let lawmakers know reforms are overdue, and you can look to websites like healthychild.org and environmentalworkinggroups.org, and you can log on to these websites and let your lawmakers know that it's time for reform. Just want to acknowledge all of our funders, both for our research and for our clinical sites. I want to thank you all for listening.